The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Well, that was almost like a break day, wasn't it? Digging it. I could get used to that. Oh, no, he doesn't really mean that, does he? He doesn't. Because by the third day of the offseason, I'm going to wish it was draft day. God, I love that month leading up to fantasy drafts. That's the best. For so many reasons. It's when we're making all these critical decisions, and I love the analysis of mock drafts, not the doing of them so much. I don't really like being involved in them. I like to break it down after the fact. I'm getting way ahead of myself here. It's Wednesday, April 3rd, and I'm talking about how happy I am for mock drafts because I felt guilty for saying that I was happy that Tuesday was a fairly straightforward day. But it was, right? You know, teams like Atlanta, the Lakers, just trying to get a feel for who's actually doing stuff on these teams. And I think we have a better idea, at least from a minutes perspective. Lakers were in relative blowout. I don't know that it changed the distribution all that much. Like Rondo still played 36 minutes and KCP still played 40. And it was competitive for a decent chunk of the ball game. And then as long as Hart, Kuzma, LeBron, Tyson Chandler, Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram are all out, at least plenty of opportunity for these other guys. And of course, the ones that we've been talking about a bunch on this podcast are Alex Caruso and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. The one that might deserve to get into the mix is Reggie Bullock, and we'll get into that shortly. First things first, welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. It's Wednesday. It's DFS Day, everyone. Happy DFS Day. We'll be talking to Mike Apotria in about 15, 20 minutes or so. Get you ready for tonight's contest, which I suggest you join for all the reasons I went through on yesterday's show, because it probably won't be maxed out, which means you actually have a better than even odds shot to cash in. There's no draw from DraftKings, and the prize package is the same regardless of how many people are in the contest. First place wins money and a Hoop Ball t-shirt. Second place wins money and a Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee gift bag. And then third through 20th, if I get my numbers right, all win cash as well. A share of $375 in prizes. Big thank you, as always, to Hawaiian Isles, our good buddies over there at the Kona Coffee Company. It's hawaiianisles.com, at HI Kona Coffee on Twitter. Go check them out. And probably buy some stuff. That would be to our liking. Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company, that, of course, DFS stuff we'll talk about momentarily. We got the 4 games from Tuesday to recap. But really, you know, I know that there were evening games, and there's always something to talk about in those things. But the teams we were watching going into Tuesday night were the Lakers and the Hawks. And I think we got a pretty good feel for what they're going to... Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen the same every single night. That's the key, is that things can... You know, you might see Mike Muscala. He played a few more minutes in this game. Might trend back down. Lance Stevenson, his minutes have been fluctuating pretty wildly. But every little bit of data right now is worthwhile, because you're going to get this more extended look usually at kind of goofball guys, and we should have a lot of those things to watch tonight on a much larger Wednesday evening card. So let's dig into that. We'll obviously talk a little bit about streaming stuff, but not much, because I still want to kind of put my foot down on the don't use more than one move the first 3 days of this week. By tomorrow, Thursday, then you could maybe start thinking about that second move. I still wouldn't. I'd like to try to save it, you know, in case somebody gets shut down and you have all of your available moves or all -1. But it's an opportunity where you could maybe upgrade a guy and then hope that you only have 2 guys that go down starting on Friday. But the key is, you know, normally on Thursday, you're like, oh, well, I got, you know, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There's only 3 days left in the week for me to use up all my moves. There's still, at that point, 6 more days, because it goes all the way until next Wednesday, and you probably don't get a rehash. First things first, the Thunder. They're an easy one. You know, it's funny. For as awesome, as amazing and awesome as he's been, I think Jeremy Grant is going to get underdrafted next year, and I hope I end up with a whole bunch of Jeremy Grant, because I have nothing but regret this year. I picked him up in 3 different leagues, and I dropped him when he was just sort of piddling around near the top 115 range. I thought, I can find somebody else who's got some more upside. And then he just kicked it into overdrive, and he's been great. Of course, this was a nice, easy game against the Lakers defense. KCP, though, 40 minutes. He's a guy we've been preaching for a while now. Hopefully, nobody dropped him for any reason. He's been so good, I don't know why anybody would. Alex Caruso, 15 points, 7 assists, 2 steals, and a 3-pointer. He's been very good. 5 turnovers was a little bit of a buzzkill. JaVale McGee's been awesome. His line was a little quieter in this one, but he should be fine. That's the Steven Adams effect. And then the names that are interesting here, Rajon Rondo, he's a triple-double threat playing big minutes for this team right now. The names that are interesting are Lance Stevenson, I know, I can't believe I'm saying that either, and Reggie Bullock, because we've seen them get up into the 30s in minutes. It seems right now, at least, like Bullock's minutes are a little bit safer as he works his way back. He seems to be mostly healthy now. I believe that's 30-plus in 2 games in a row. And you're going to need his stat set, which is mostly threes and Ds. Threes and Ds? I shouldn't phrase it like that. Threes, some steals, a couple of rebounds here and there. It's not going to be an exciting stat set. I'd rather have KCP because he's out there taking a bunch of shots. At least there's sort of the upside factor on the KCP side of that ledger. But now it looks as though at least you can trust Bullock to get some minutes, and with no LeBron, and no Ingram, and no Ball, and no Kuzma, and no Hart, and now everybody, there's no one left. If you're playing 30 minutes, you almost have to take 10 shots. Lakers had 21 turnovers in this game. That was not good. And only 10 free throws. That was also not good. They just got vastly outshot, out-rebounded. It was not a stellar performance. And a Thunder team that needed a win and should have gotten one in this game, and they did. And the other team we were tracking pretty closely was Atlanta. And this was a weird one because they started resting all sorts of people. John Collins out. Dwayne Dedmon out for the year. Taurean Prince out, which left a void. Justin Anderson got the start, but his minutes got peeled back. You saw 30-plus in the last one. This time around, you saw some more Kent Bazemore. It wasn't a ton. He sort of got loose in his time. Kevin Huerter, Trae Young. They're really trending down with everybody's minutes, except for one guy, and that one guy is Alex Len, who, with Dwayne Dedmon out, has almost free reign at the center position. He can do anything he wants. He's probably going to hurt you in percentages on the whole, but he had a nice ball game, and he didn't miss a ton of his shots. He missed a bunch of his free throws, and he usually will turn the ball over, but I think he's one of those weird late-season guys you can grab and just throw him out there because he's going to be reasonably high usage. He's going to get plenty of looks. They're going to be playing a crazy up-tempo pace. Trae Young's going to be looking for him as a roll man, as a pick-and-pop guy. He seems to have added the three-pointer. So I would, believe it or not, trot him out there with confidence. He's going to be seeing enough minutes where he should be used. It's a silly thing to say, but here we are. And then you got your less intriguing evening games, teams we weren't all that interested in seeing what happened. As Rockets are pretty predictable. Nice to see Kenneth Faried do a little bit of stuff with his time. Game that got out of hand early, so numbers were a tad bit skewed. But the usual suspects, basically, in these ones. Nuggets, you got some stuff out of the starting bunch, give or take Will Barton and Gary Harris every once in a while. And then with Golden State, Kevin Durant got himself ejected, but Boogie, Dre, Clay, Steph, whatever. Another game that was not super competitive with teams that we weren't super interested in. That's the nature of the beast right now. There's certain teams where it seems relevant, other ones where kind of doesn't. We're looking for the spots where we can make pickups that will drastically alter the conclusion of your year. And you've got a massive Wednesday coming up. We're obviously going to talk a ton about it from a DFS standpoint, but just a few things to keep an eye on this big Wednesday night for the 9-category crew. Those that are, again, don't use your moves yet, unless you have to, if you're in a head-to-head with a cap. But if you're working on a roto deal and you're coming down the stretch and you're looking for some of the young guys, Knicks are a team to monitor. They've got a lot of guys out right now. Luke Cornett is a possibility. Damian Dotson is a possibility. Kevin Knox, Emmanuel Mudiay, all of these guys, they have their warts. But 35 to 40 minutes is an inarguable thing. Guys just do enough in certain categories. And You have to be aware of what you're hunting for in your roto battles, because, if you're teetering on the brink in percentages, you probably don't want to pick up Moutier or Knox, but you get it. Indiana, Detroit, not much going on there. It looks like Wayne Ellington has kind of distanced himself as the best three-point option on this team. He's the only one that's been able to kind of hold it together. Chicago, Walter Lemon Jr., obviously we're watching. Shaq Harrison, sounds like Dunn, Mark, and Levine. They might just be done. I don't know. Someone might play again. But as it stands right now, you've got these weird guys playing huge minutes. Capitalize on that. It's a good time to throw them in. Again, not worthy of a use. Maybe Harrison. He's been good. The other guy's not worthy of a head-to-head move, but Roto, where you don't have a moves cap, you got your games cap, throw some of these guys in there, especially against a Washington team that's now probably turning the page a little bit. Wouldn't be surprised to see Bradley Beal sit out a game down the stretch. Trevor Ariza's done. We've seen them dial back Jeff Green, so there's a ton of Thomas Bryant and Bobby Portis and Sato and Beal. So it should be a high-scoring game, and I think we might see some interesting stuff out of Chicago's side. Miami, they've been thinned, although now Justice Winslow is questionable. I haven't heard a change of status on Josh Richardson yet, but possibility he might have been dropped in some head-to-head leagues because of his injury. Keep an eye on that one. That's one to really monitor the injury news before you make any earth-shattering roster decisions. Philly, they're just going to keep resting guys because they got nothing to play for. Atlanta, we already talked about. Toronto, nothing. Brooklyn, nothing. Charlotte, this is one. Keep an eye on Devontae Graham. I've said it already. I know he had a terrible game, but Kemba's got to be done soon. He has to be, right? He's got to take off the last game or two, or maybe half of them. And then Graham, 30-some-odd minutes as the point guard. You're looking at a guy that could put up some pretty big assist numbers, and maybe they turn him loose a little bit. So Charlotte is definitely a spot to keep a close watch on. New Orleans, Anthony Davis has been probable for 4 games in a row, and he hasn't played in any of them, so keep using Christian Wood until something stops you. Minnesota, we've talked about them. It's I think I still trust Okogie, Tyus Jones, obviously Wiggins and Towns. Dallas, we're seeing this Trey Burke thing going on now, so keep an eye on him if he jumps over Jalen Brunson for playing time. And then Kleba and Powell are the guys that I actually do trust right now. Doncic, obviously, if he plays, but it sounds like he probably won't. San Antonio, Denver, nothing much there. Utah, Phoenix, obviously Rashawn Holmes is the guy I'm watching. He should be awesome until Ayton comes back, if he comes back. Memphis, no Jonas Valanciunas. I kind of forgot to talk more about this one. I don't know if Ivan Rabb is going to be worth using, so I don't know if I'd grab him in advance, but certainly if he's logging 15, 16 minutes by halftime of this game, you probably scoop him up. I've said it before, he needs the full 30 minutes to be a useful fantasy player because his stat set is relatively empty outside of points and rebounds, but in 30 minutes, double-double stuff can come along, and so then you've got a guy that might be worth grabbing. Obviously, Delon Wright is useful. Bruno Caboclo has been pretty good of late. I think those are the guys you could probably trot out with Memphis. Portland, they got themselves locked into a weird one last time, blowout rules, so guys like Rodney Hood went huge, but I think you're using Enes Kanter, obviously Dame, Seth Curry are the 3 guys that I certainly trust. Aminu, I would throw out there. I don't think I trust Rodney Hood. And Zach Collins is teetering on the brink. It's a block specialist kind of thing, and then you hope he knocks in a few threes. Houston and the Clippers, not much going on there. Depending on whether or not LA rests Patrick Beverley, I suppose you could see a little bit more Gilgeous-Alexander, a little more Landry Shamet, a little more Garrett Temple, but not a lot to keep an eye on there. So that's what's going on that front, and that allows us to turn our page to DFS. We haven't been able to talk about that we did a little bit last week, obviously, but, set up a little side game going on, but this is back to the official contest, so we'll tell you about that. We'll break down the DFS card with our good buddy, the wonderful Mike Apotria. Let's dial him up now. Good afternoon, Mike.
Good morning, Dan, and it is a good morning. We have my favorite part of the DFS season approaching. Other than the beginning of the season, Dan, this is my wheelhouse. This is my favorite part of the year. Oh yeah.
Okay, explain yourself.
We're in April basketball right here. This is where you can separate yourself from the avid players, the guys who kind of play a little bit more of baseball and combined with basketball. You have a little bit more time to do some research now that your fantasy leagues are mostly completed. You have no excuses, and research and running those numbers is what is going to separate yourself, because we're going to see a lot of G League type players in starting lineups where a lot of people don't know a lot about them. We don't know a lot about the rotation, how many minutes they're going to get. But if you dive into it and you look hard enough, you'll find some little tidbits that separate your lineups from those.
So is this a time of year where the discrepancy between first place and last place in a contest gets bigger? Where, like, you might have someone who picks 5 dudes that are all 3,500 and they just crush, and the other 3 guys are all, $9,000-$10,000 guys. You could have someone that hits like 350 points, but if you pick the wrong $3,500 guys, they could come in with like 6, and you could have a lineup of like 95 points at the end of the night. There's got to be a way to find a middle ground, but I feel like the volatility right now has got to be crazy.
That's absolutely it. It's crazy volatile. We're going to have a lot of guys that are grouped up around that same price range who, and it comes down to kind of eliminating some of those guys from your player pool and just feeling confident. Looking at, team matchups specifically, like let's say tonight we got the Bulls going against Washington. That's a great spot. And then you also want to break it down to an individual position standpoint and look at who's going to be guarding who. We'll do that later on in the night when Rudy Gobert decides to pop up and play in Phoenix. But it's taking everything into account on top of the slate in a whole. Today we have 12 games on. Ownership is going to be a lot more spread out. There's going to be chalky guys and popular guys, but you're a lot less worried about that when you have 12 games because there's so many other ways you could separate your lineup.
Okay, so first thing with DFS that, at least in my mind, is news, breaking news, right? I know that you like to whittle down the games based on totals and stuff like that. I like to look at news first because sometimes if you can just knock out those free squares right out of the chute, then you're only building a 6 or 7 person team as well. So what do we know from the news this morning? I think the big one that's popped up is that Bradley Beal is playing, so I guess that's your big piece of non-news. But Luka Doncic might also play. Taurean Prince is questionable. There are already a few pieces of news that have popped up today.
Yeah, and actually, I think Doncic got ruled probable, and that's one of the big pieces of news I wanted to hear. He's always one of my favorite players when he plays on any slate. He has tremendous upside, and he's fairly priced around that mid 8K, high 8K range where we could see him outscore guys who are 9.5, 9.6, and 10K. So he's always on the slate. It's a close matchup, a good game. We know the Timberwolves play very little defense at this point, so that was definitely a big piece of news that broke for me. And we're still going to be waiting on a ton. Like, we need to know what's going on over there in Memphis. That's going to be incredibly important. Right now, we know Jonas is out. We know Mike Conley is doubtful. But we have a couple guys that are priced up, making it a little less unappealing to play, but they're still in play. And then we need to know if Joakim Noah is going to play. That's going to be a huge factor because one of my favorite value plays for the night is going to be Ivan Robb if we hear Noah's out. And even if Noah's in, I imagine Rob has to play at least mid to high 20 minutes, maybe even 32. And if Noah's out, he's going to be pressed for at least 35 minutes. So it's getting the value, I think, tonight in the right spots. And yes, we have tons and tons of injuries. Doesn't mean we need to go to certain spots, though. We're going to get to a few of the games, like being the Atlanta game and that Memphis game where there's tons of value, but do we really need to go there? I'm trying to just keep my value straight and narrow. Go with the guys I think have a good floor on top of offer some upside rather than the guys who are just a little high risk, high reward because like you said earlier, one volatile player in tonight's lineup will really sink you.
So, all right, let's move to what games to eliminate basically right out of the chute. Which ones are you knocking off of your potential card? Are there any games where you're just like, nope, no one in this game is worth using regardless of what other stuff may be going on?
Well, yeah, I'm really not looking at the Indiana-Detroit game. It's a close game. It's actually a very meaningful game for Detroit. So I would not be surprised if you do get some guys that, go off in that game. I don't think I really need to go there. Drummond got priced up a little bit. I mean, if we hear that Blake Griffin's out, that kind of changes things. Right now, he's another guy that we're keeping an eye on. He's questionable. With him out, Thon Maker kind of becomes a value play. And then we can also look at like Reggie Jackson, who gets a nice increase of usage with Blake Griffin off the court as well. But not particular a spot I'm gravitating towards. New York, Orlando, kind of the same thing. We already heard that Cornette's going to be benched today for Mario Hezonja because David Fizdale promised him. I guess promises mean more than developing at this point in the league. I don't get it. It's such a Fizdale thing to do. So I'm really just not trusting anyone over there on New York. If I were to play anybody, it would probably be Moutier, just because we know that they have really no other point guards to play. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of locked into that 30-plus minutes. But even he got priced up. I think he's like 6,500 on DraftKings. And, you like those guys on the shorter slates or when they're a little bit cheaper and better spots. But again, Orlando plays good D. Orlando wants to win this game. So if I'm playing anybody in this game, it would probably be those guys on that side, and it would just be Aaron Gordon, Vucevic. But those are probably the only two games I'm directly crossing off. Boston, Miami's not very appealing, but the news of Marcus Morris and Jaylen Brown being rolled out kind of makes Gordon Hayward a little bit more appetizing, knowing he's going to get a ton of bench usage. So those are the only games, and it's again waiting on the news. We might be able to cross off Toronto, Brooklyn now. But I really want to wait and see if anyone for Toronto is going to get rolled out first before I do that. Because if Kawhi gets rolled out, we can immediately start looking at guys like Lowry and Siakam, and vice versa. If Lowry's rolled out, we can start looking at the backups like Van Fleet, and it's really a toss up at this point. But there's so many good spots, including the value, where you don't really need to go there. So I think they're worth crossing off. And the last one, if I had to mention, would probably be Denver, San Antonio. Denver back-to-back, it's just not a great spot for either team right now. I don't think we need to go there. Jokic can break a slate at any point in time, but there's probably about 2 or 3 other centers that I'm going to have over him.
A lot of loads to manage in that Toronto game was what I was thinking as you were talking about who may or may not play. So that method I know works for a lot of the listeners we have out there of looking at games individually and then digging into sort of the players that are engaged in those games. And that makes sense to me for a few of them. Like almost anytime Atlanta's involved in a game, it's going to be high scoring. Almost anytime Washington is involved in a game, it's going to be relatively high scoring. I get that part of things. New Orleans, I think, falls into that same bucket of just teams that are so bad and play no defense that anybody involved in them is going to be in play. But for me, my brain works better if we look at it from a pricing chunk standpoint. So let's do this both ways on today's show. I think maybe that'll cover our bases, because I go into our DFS shows, Mike, and I'm constantly trying to tweak how we go through the card in a way that kind of presents the information so that everybody can make sense of it. So let's finish up the way we started, which is looking at games, and then transition to the other way, which is looking at pricing. You mentioned the handful of games that you're sort of looking to rule out. Obviously, nothing can be completely eliminated, because if a superstar gets knocked out of any one of those, then value pops up in other places. But some of the games you mentioned that you are looking at, Chicago, Washington, I think you threw out there. You mentioned Atlanta as a team. I just said Portland. I don't know what's going on the Charlotte side. I guess they're still playing their guys, but maybe not. So what other games are you looking at as sort of a starting point of guys you're looking for to put into your lineup?
It's going to be the games with the higher total. So we already eliminated about 4 or 5 games, quote unquote. I'm taking those games out of my pool. So it only leaves about 7 left. And out of those 7, you said it, the Chicago-Washington games coming in with a 228 over-under right now. We have a few revenge spots. We got a few value spots we could take advantage of. Again, Atlanta, Philly should be another high-scoring one, 239.5 total right now. We're also going to have an opportunity for some value in that game that we'll get to that with the pricing later. I'm going to be heavy on the Charlotte-New Orleans game. It's just going in the right spots, I think. Don't get too cute here. There's 2 spots basically on Charlotte. I'm looking at either Kemba or it's Willie Hernan-Gomez if you want to look at a nice value play. And on the other side, I think Anthony Davis is actually cheap enough to play if he's if we're looking at him.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it, by the way. Don't even get me started on my Anthony Davis rant. This is the 4th game in a row he's been probable, and he hasn't played in any of the previous 3. They're trolling us, Mike.
I you know what? And I'll take that troll, because that troll might lower the ownership on Christian Wood a little bit. And I'll just flat out say it. He's too expensive if Davis actually does play. I don't think I could pay $6,300. I just don't know how many minutes he was getting. If we know he's getting 28, 26, 30 minutes, Davis is out, you can lock and load him again. And then I'm going to have a little bit of attention in those last 2 games too. I'm going to have a little bit of the Memphis-Portland game, a little bit of the Houston-LA game. And I think you can get some love for Utah guys. Really mainly Gobert is the guy I'm looking at, but they're all in good spots on that side of the ball.
Okay, so now on the pricing side, because this is the side that makes more sense in my head. When I'm going through my lineups, and this is what I end up doing every week on my way to usually a top 40 finish in our contest, is I look at the cheapest guys. I start all the way at the very bottom. I click on that all button, because I'm not even looking at positions yet. And I start at the very bottom, and I slowly scroll my way up the charts until I come across any names that look remotely interesting, and I either write them down or I throw them in the lineup just to sort of keep track of them. And then I see how much money I've got left over. Who are the guys, Mike, as you scroll up from the bottom that jump out to you as dudes you could dump into your lineup tonight? This is where I want to start. I want to spend the littlest amount possible to fill a few roster slots.
Well, the problem is that a lot of the guys that were all the way at the bottom for the past few days or week because of all these injuries and G League guys getting called up are now in the middle.
Blasphemy.
So those guys got a little price boost. So I made a shell lineup right now, and the cheapest value play I generally feel comfortable with playing is about 4,100.
Okay.
It's going to be Willie Hernan-Gomez, and we also have like Kent Bazemore around that price range. Ivan Robs, 4,200. And then it starts to jump up a little bit. We got Walter Lemon Jr., 4,700. I think he's still viable if he's playing 30 minutes, and he already got announced as a starter in that lineup. Wayne Selden got priced up a little bit too much for me. You could take a dart throw on Cabarro. TLC, sometimes he gets those minutes, but not one of the ones I'm feeling extra comfortable in. I'm looking at Rashawn Holmes, 5,200. I just mentioned before.
That's what I'm talking about.
I got to get some hoop ball love here. We love our Rashawn Holmes. They got nobody. Let's be real. Without Ayton, they're playing two big bodies. They're gonna need somebody. Dragon Bender, would get dunked off the court probably very fast. It's a troubling spot where you can be worried about foul trouble. But Gobert, I don't really see him attacking him offensively to get him in foul trouble. He's not that type of guy. It's going to be a couple pick and rolls, a couple transition dunks, but I'm expecting good games from both of them, just on sheer minutes and matchup.
Where the hell did you say he was? I want to throw him into my lineup right now. 50-something?
He's 5,200, and he's a guy that you
come to me, Rashawn.
Like him because you want to play him at power forward. Center and point guard spots are generally the best spots on DraftKings. You want to try to get as many point guards and center in there as possible. And when you can get a center actually playing power forward, it's an advantage.
All right, so I got Walter Lemon Jr., Ivan Rabb, Willie Hernan-Gomez, and Rashawn Holmes in my build that we're working on right here, mid-show. I'm doing it as we talk here, so if you lose my attention for a second, Mike, just snap at me on the podcast. I'm trying to do this while we talk. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I've got those four guys in my lineup. I got 4 slots left, and I got about $32,000 to work with here. Am I starting? Should I move now to the top of the list, or should I look for another guy in that 45 to 55 range to really round out the cheapies?
Well, there might be like 1 or 2 more guys left in there, but I mean, at this point, you're standing with a good amount of guys who are cheap enough that you feel comfortable with. So what I would start doing is start looking at the guys that are a little bit more priced up that you feel comfortable with, that you like their spots, who you think are still values at their price, and then see what's left over in that last spot. See what you have left. You might have $4,000 left, you might have $6,000 left, or you might have 7, and cross that road when it kind of gets there. But if we start looking at some of the more expensive guys, James Harden in a great spot, still going for the MVP. Karl Anthony Towns trying to get that All-NBA third team bonus over there. He's facing Dallas in a good spot. Lillard with no usage at 9,800. He's been burning me, but it's Lillard. He's going to shoot 25, 30 times one of these games, and when he does, you're going to want him. And then Kemba, another guy I mentioned earlier, 8,900 if you wanted to spend there. And we can't forget about the 2 guys I mentioned earlier. Ben Simmons at 95, Doncic at 88 are both fantastic plays, and Gobert at 85. So those are the guys I'm really trying to spend up on. If you wanted to go down from Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris is right there for $2,000 cheaper, which is a great play as well. So we don't really need to get too cute. We have expensive guys in good spots and pace up spots against teams that play very little defense that we could take advantage of.
So no reason for me to throw Gordon Hayward in there as another $5,000 guy.
I don't mind him if it rounds out. Like I think I mentioned Hayward a little earlier. I don't mind him whatsoever. He's 5,300. It's not exactly the greatest spot in the world. The Heat tend to slow games down. This game doesn't have an incredibly high total. I'll check it real quick. It's a 212.5 total.
Yeah,
so
pretty low.
It's one of the lower ones on the slate. I think it's tied for the second lowest on the slate, but that doesn't mean that one guy can't go out there and crush and get 30 or 40 DraftKings points at his price, but he's going to have a bunch of second usage. So if you're playing him, it's just a complete one-off. I would never look to pair him with a guy on Miami or try to stack this game. If it's the last guy you're slipping in there and you have 5,300, I like it. I'm not going to go try jamming him in there though.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. What about, and I know the prices are up a little bit, what about some of the Memphis guards with Mike Conley getting ruled out? Are any of them cheap enough to use?
This is where it gets tough because, if we already know that Conley's doubtful, and when Conley's doubtful, Wright's been absolutely smashing. And now his price is reflecting that. He's 6,500.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the guy's producing a little bit over a point per minute, and if you're telling me he's going to play 35, 36, 37 minutes, and we do the math, that's at least, 35 to 40 DraftKings points. So he's well worth it at that same token. So I'm having the most trouble is getting down into that 6.5 price K range because I like so many of these guys that are 8K and up. And then I have some value where it's 5K and less where I can do a little bit of a star scrub lineup and still feel pretty good about it.
All right, so now here's where I sit. I did not put Gordon Hayward in my lineup. I put Delon Wright in my lineup. Now I've got 5 of my 8 slots filled, and I got 25.3 left to work with here. So about 8 and change K per remaining guy. What do I do from this point? Am I throwing a superstar in there and dropping 10 G's on somebody and then spending the remaining 15 on the other 2 slots? I know you mentioned some of these big names that you like. Harden, obviously, he's always a pretty safe play to go big. Doncic, you mentioned at 88. I mean, he goes crazy in every single ball game here, and you don't have to worry about percentages. Or am I going to that? I mean, I know you said you're having trouble in that 6 to 7 whatever range. I can understand why. There's guys that are priced kind of weird in there. Help me fill out my last 3 slots here, Mike.
Like I said, I'm staying out of that territory. I just don't feel comfortable with that. Maybe Kyle Lowry at 69, but now I think Dragic's getting up there a little bit too much at 68. It's against Boston. You could have a great game. I'm not going to knock it, but it's just a little too rich for my blood. And, until I get back down to that, 54, 53 territory, all those guys just seem slightly overpriced. So if it's me, I want to spend up on the guys where I feel comfortable that they can exceed their value. And, I would say throw Doncic in there. If Doncic is playing this game, I don't really expect his minutes to be limited too much. It should be at least 30 to 34. If it stays closer, even more upside. It's a tournament. We're trying to get some big upside. He's a guy that can get you 50 or 60. He's done, I think, 62 out of his past 4 games, and he's only 8,800. But one thing I wanted to ask you is what positions you have open, because that's also a big factor into it as well.
Okay, so so I had small forward, guard, and utility open, although I think I probably could have moved somebody around there. What do you think about Jabari Parker? I know that he's already had his Chicago revenge game, and that's sort of a dead angle at this point. But they've basically shut down Jeff Green and Trevor Ariza, so the minutes are there.
The minutes are there for him. It's just where's the usage going to be and what kind of Jabari Parker shows up today. He's at that mid-tier price where 40-point Jabari Parker is great, but if you get 30-point Jabari Parker, that's not enough. I'd probably lean Bobby Portis over him just because, without Jeff Green and without Ariza, those were 2 guys that primarily played power forward. And he also has the opportunity to back up Brian at center if anything happens over there. So it just seems like a little bit more available minutes for me. And he's a little bit better of a point per minute producer. So he's a guy that has a little bit more upside. So I'll probably lean Portis, but it's really a toss-up. They're both tournament plays. They're not guys I would really run out there and cash. If it's a cash game, I'd much rather play guys like Rob or Rashawn Holmes for much cheaper and just feel like they can still get to that 30-point. Because if you tell me that Parker finishes with 30, that's okay. But if you tell me Rob finishes with 30 at 42, that's a win. So it's really cost per value. So a lot of my power forward spots in my teams, they're going to be taken up by Rob and Rashawn Holmes. So it's going to be hard for me to get those $6,300 forwards in there. That's kind of why I was telling you or asking you what positions were open, because for me, if I'm spending up, it looks like it's going to be at center and guard on my teams. I have a lot of my values at the forward position, including small forward. If you want to go with Kent Bazemore, because I believe Vince Carter got ruled out this morning as well. So that's another one of their wings who, he plays a little bit of power forward. But if we hear Prince is ruled out, John Collins is expected to play, Alex Len's ruled out, well, now we have some Hawks value again. Bazemore is a very risky guy, but at 4,100, he plays 25 minutes. He can easily get there, especially without Carter. And Besbris the same thing. And then Davis is another value at center. So I just don't see myself spending up at those positions. But again, wouldn't knock it. They're good spots. It's Washington against Chicago. It's a revenge game. They're tournament flyers.
I know that he's going up against one of the toughest defenses in the league. Would you ever take a shot on the suddenly very expensive Devin Booker, who's just been taking every shot for the Phoenix Suns for the last week and a half?
This is where it comes down to price for me, like what you talked about before, how you kind of wanted to break it up and look at it two different ways. And this is one of the ways you can look at it from a price perspective. Right now, Booker, he's warranted to be that price. He's 10-3, but I'd much rather pay $100 more for Karl Anthony Towns going against Dallas, or I'd rather pay less for Damian Lillard going against Memphis, or Doncic going against Minnesota, or even Ben Simmons going against Atlanta. There's just so many other spots where I'd rather spend up or spend down compared to Booker. Because if it was Booker against Washington, that price would be viable. Or against the Hawks, I can do that. Not against Utah. I don't want to do it against Utah.
All right, fair enough. That's basically my set of questions on today's card. Do you have any thoughts you want to throw out there before we put a pin in this thing and hopefully folks can find a way to get to victory?
Yes. I just want to say thank you for the guys that came out there, and we tried to get a contest going, but unfortunately, it's like we talked about, if it doesn't fill, it doesn't fill, it won't run. But we had a good amount. We were very close. So thank you for everybody that did join. We're back at it though this week. So make sure you're in the contest and just pay attention to the news. It's all on news at this point, and you have to be able to adjust. A lot of guys are going to get ruled in, and now value is going to open up. Try not to be too attached to any one player at the beginning of the day, because that could simply change. And evaluate your lineup as a whole compared to the slate. Look at it. Think about it. We're going to need high totals. We got 12 games on. We got a lot of value that's going to open up. So we're going to need high totals to win. And just look at your lineup and think, can this lineup get to 400 points or 350? And if it doesn't, you might want to reevaluate it, because I have a good feeling that with this many games and this amount of value, it's going to get up there.
Holy heck. Yeah, there's a lot of value. There's a lot of GPs out there that you can dump into a lineup right now. The wonderful, the magical, the mysterious, the marvelous Mike Apotria, at Mike Apotria on Twitter. We're coming down the chute here, man. We can still do some DFS shows as we hit into playoff time, but next week is the last day of the regular season, so we got one more official in-season DFS contest. Good sir, I will say now, with still one left on the docket, it's been a freaking pleasure.
It's been a ride, Dan. I love this, man. This has been a great season for us. We've seen some DFS guys crawl out of these woodworks, and thanks, everybody. I appreciate all the love and support.
We'll get Mike back on next week. I assume we'll be having a DFS contest, but even if not, we'll talk to our good buddy Mike Apotria. Have a wonderful day, Mike. Good luck tonight. You too, Dan. Good luck. He's the magical Mike Apotria. Love that dude. Let's wrap things up on today's podcast. We talked yesterday, we talked today, we talked Mike, we talked DFS. I think the only thing I didn't mention is please rate and review the podcast. You guys know how to do it, I think. I've certainly gone through it too many times, an annoying number of times on this show. But if you're still looking for how to find it, whatever service you use, it's generally a different way. But if you're on any of the Apple side of stuff, that's the one that generally sort of drives the market. Podcast app on your mobile device or just using iTunes, pretty easy to find, should only take you about 90 seconds. It's really so little. I think you can even do it while you're listening to the show, which would be a sweet feature, and I didn't check to see if you can before I said it. I hope you can. Just while I'm blathering on here at the end of the podcast, just click into there, scroll down to the bottom on the phone app, and there should be the rate and review section there. Throw a 5-star deal on our thing. We'd love it. We are 2 away from 200. Incredible. I can't believe we got to that point. I'm so blown away. One more big thank you to Mike Apotria at MikeApotria on Twitter. I am at Dan Besbris. This is Fantasy NBA Today. Have a wonderful Wednesday, everybody. Good luck in the contest. We got the links going out. We'll tweet them out throughout the day repeatedly, so if you want it, you can find it. And that's that. Tomorrow, half-length Thursday, we'll just break down the Wednesday results. Talk to Brew on Friday. That'll be our last live free show of the 2018-2019 NBA season. I think Aaron and I will do probably a recorded wrap-up show after the season ends, but if you have any last questions or just want to shoot the breeze with us, that'll be on Friday at about 10 a.m. Pacific time. That you can call that put a little tilde before the 10, so it'll be around 10 a.m. Again, for Mike, I'm Dan. Have a wonderful Wednesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow. So long, everybody.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.